Hello, good afternoon for Tepao in Singapore and good morning for Lisabona in Germany at this moment. My name is RIZKI LAZUARDI and today I will host you for the session by SEAscreen. But first I will introduce everyone what SEAscreen is about. Well, organized in Makassar, Southeast Asian Screen Academy or SEAscreen is a film training and development program initiated by film director Riri Riza and Rumata Art Space. SEAscreen brings all the filmmakers from Southeast Asia, whether they are prominent or an aspiring ones, in a friendly, small and intimate collaboration and interactions. SEAscreen is also a film cultural for Asian region, particularly for Southeast Asian region. Therefore, not only film training and development, SEAscreen is also held any other sub-programs such as panel discussion, workshop, and film screening. SEAscreen is initiated by Rumata Art Space, established in 2011 by Rumata Foundation, located in Makassar, South Sulawesi. Rumata Art Space is a non-profit organization that aims to support the progress of the local art scene through various initiative projects, such as a festival, workshop, performance, and any kind of creative activities from any kind of forms of artistic expression. And this year, the theme is Manifesto, and a little bit about Manifesto. Due to the pandemic, this year is a momentum for film activists from Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia, to remain empowered, work hand in hand, and provide mutual support by organizing film programs through the online platforms. However, this can be seen as an opportunity to produce new ideas and discourse about films, audiences, audience behavior before and after the pandemic, including the possibility of a new aesthetic. It is the times like this that various questions arise about what is cinema today, including is the virtual a future? Today, we are increasingly feeling that technology is an extension of the human body. Digital platforms help society to help them stay connected with art, specifically film during the confinement at home. Platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Netflix, etc. are the window for taking trip to entertain ourselves. The availability of these digital platforms is also become some kind of a push to make short film at home as an exercise to keep honing their storytelling skill through audiovisual media. Post-pandemic will probably give birth to a new reality in film, including Southeast Asia frames its region. To deal with film as an art, it is very complex. It requires perspective from other interdisciplinary arts to trace the intersection between film with many kind of other arts. Because as mentioned above, the pandemic has even become a stimulus for searching for the new aesthetic. For this reason, this year's SEAscreen theme is the Manifesto, as a formulation of our resilience, Southeast Asian filmmakers to continue to work and to create even in critical times. Well, and for session today, we'll talk specifically about archive. And joining with us this moment, we have LISABONA, archivist or consultant for film preservation and restoration, currently in Berlin, Germany. And we also have joining with us Tepao from Asian Film Archive, based in Singapore. I will start with Lisa first. Hello, Lisa. You can hear me?
Hi, RIZKI.
Yes, you can hear me.
It's so strange to know that one of the first talks I have during this pandemic, an online talk, was with you, and then here we go again.
Yeah, Lisa was my host, and then I hosted you for another program, and now I'm back as the host for your presentation. I will briefly introduce Lisa. Wait a moment. LISABONA RAHMAN started her career in film as a critic, and then Lisa organized independent cinema. The first in Indonesia was Kinoforum by Jakarta Art Council. Parallel with that initiative, she joined with the online catalog for Indonesian film, filmindonesia.or.id, correct me if I'm wrong. And now she documents the development of Indonesian film industry. Lisa studies film preservation in the Netherlands. Now she's currently working for various preservation programs. Okay, Lisa, the time is yours. You want to show some slides or presentation?
No.
No, okay. Then yeah, feel free. Without further ado.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think it's not very easy to talk for 5 minutes and say what our job is about, but I will try my best. I started being interested in film archiving actually through my work as a programmer. I was working for maybe I can say Indonesia's first micro cinema located in Jakarta, as RIZKI mentioned. It's Kino Forum run by the Arts Council of Jakarta. And at that time, my job was to curate film programs. And my job was specified by the Arts Council saying that, could you please create a program for the cinema that introduces not only contemporary cinema, but also history of cinema. And I also had to do history of cinema, not only like world cinema, but also Indonesian cinema. So at first it seemed like an easy task. I thought, yeah, okay, I'll just, make my screening plans each month and, call people up and get films. But in the end, it wasn't as easy as that. And I realized how different it was in terms of getting access to historical films from Indonesia and outside of Indonesia. I would say that in general, accessing historical films of Indonesia is difficult. I mean, now, if I look back after almost 15 years, it is easier, but the question is, how do we access it? Yeah. At that time, it was not very easy to see films, just simply by typing into your keyboard, finding it on YouTube, not even talking about whether it's legal or illegal. But at that time, it wasn't as simple as that. You have to go to certain places to be able to watch films. You have to go to libraries or archives to be able to see films and do research or programming. And so I became aware of how difficult it was to access Indonesian historical films, and also the condition of which I could see these films were very bad. Most of the time I have to be contented with seeing, a very bad VHS copy transferred to VCD or DVD. Maybe you don't even know what VCD anymore today. Basically, it's a very low quality copy of PAL resolution, and the quality of audio is also very bad. So you have to understand that when I encounter Indonesian films, like old Indonesian films, I most of the time have to see them in low quality. Most of them are not complete. And also sometimes the audio is either distorted or incomplete. And that kind of brought me to the next chapter of my work, in which I promised myself that I would try and look for ways to present Indonesian films in the best way possible. And I mean, of course, old films. And that really pushed me to learn something. Yeah, I cannot just grab digitized videos from VCD and bring it to my audience at the cinema at Kino Forum at that time. I mean, it was a proper cinema. It had 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter projectors, and kind of very simple digital video screening equipments. So I also learned how to project analog films. I mean, this is a knowledge that I have, but because of my previous works, but 35 millimeter projection at that time was new to me because I was only trained using 16 millimeter projectors. So there I go, you know, I was learning about Indonesian film history, the condition of the archiving of Indonesian films, and at the same time, how to bring it back to an audience. So it was really a lot to learn in such a short amount of time. And that also brought me to meet very, very special people. And Bitiam Tan and Tipao were once among the people that really enlightened me at that time about this kind of work, yeah, what it means to keep films in a good way, and also at the same time, not only keeping them locked in a safe, but at the same time also reintroducing them to an audience. I think we could talk more about how challenging this work is and why it is especially difficult to do such a task that seems simple, yeah, in our region in Asia. Later when we do our discussion, but for now, I would just say, of course, time is better now, access is better now, but I would like us today to question how we got to that access, and we will do it in, you know, later after Tipao finishes his presentation. So that's my opening statement.
So I'll take that's your opening presentation. So we are expecting for the second one. Okay, now it's turn for Tipao. Hi, Tipao.
Hello, hi, RIZKI.
Yeah, I will briefly introduce you. Chu Tipao, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, is a film archivist based in Singapore, currently works for the Asian Film Archive. Tipao is responsible for the restoration supervision at the AFA, and Tipao has contributed many writings and journal related to independent digital film production. Well, this is in Indonesia, so I have to find it the right word in English, and its impact on the film archive in Singapore. Is it right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. You have written a book called Singapore Cinema, The New Perspective.
A chapter.
A chapter.
Not the whole book.
Okay, without further ado, Tipao, please.
Thank you so much. I have a little presentation I can share.
Looking
actually.
forward.
So I will just share my screen. Yep. Okay, so yeah, first of all, thank you, SEAscreen Academy, for inviting me to today's session. So I've got this brief at the start that I should, you know, begin by talking about my experience in archiving films, which I've been doing for the past almost 11 years. So I guess you can say, I guess I spent much of my youth, I guess, since my early 20s, just doing archiving films. So I majored in cinema studies back in university. So when I first graduated, I did not have a clue what a film archive is or what a film archive does as a film graduate. But at that time, when I came back to Singapore, I took up an internship anyway with the Asia Film Archive that was looking for a collections intern. So it was supposed to be a 3-month internship. But then, after I joined, there was no turning back. They offered me a full-time and I couldn't refuse it. Because I think at that time I really learned a lot from a very lean organization. So we've always been really small and lean. But at the same time, I get an immense satisfaction and find great meaning in what I do. This whole idea about saving films. So in my first year, which is in 2009, I also got the chance to attend an archiving conference in Jakarta, which is, of course, I think it's the first time I met Riri Riza as well as LISABONA. And I also got to visit the Cinematheque Indonesia as well. So that was, looking back, that was like more than 10 years ago. I think since then, some things hasn't changed, but I think a lot has changed, I think, at least in this archiving world, I think. So I just wanted to maybe give a little short introduction about what the Asian Film Archive, or AFA for short, does, more for the benefit for those who might not be familiar with us. We are actually, by many standards, still a relatively young archive. So we only started in 2005, where our founder, I think Lisa mentioned his name, Tan Bee Tiam. He was a fresh graduate, and he was a freshly graduated engineer, in fact, at that time. But he's really passionate about filmmaking as well as photography, and he enjoyed watching films as well. And he realized that how difficult it was to find and watch independently made Asian films at that time that can only be seen in the festival circuit. So I think it was at that time he also got to interact and got acquainted with a number of these independent filmmakers as well. And he got to know and realize that many of these filmmakers' early works were not available simply because they weren't kept properly by the owners themselves, or they were just being shelved, after the filmmakers finished and it got screened, and they moved on very quickly to their next projects. So this kind of gave him the idea to sort of set up this Asian film archive in Singapore. And so it really started as a grassroots sort of movement where the archive actually just did a first open call for submission at first, when it started, with the support from our local film community and some of the volunteers. And we collected, I think, about 400 over titles around Asia at that time. So this was quite interesting and quite surprising, I think, for us at that time as well, because it's then that we realized there is such a need for an archive like that. And so that sort of formed our first collection. And at that time, in 2005, I think there were already like a few dedicated national film archives within Asia that has been preserving their own national audiovisual heritage. So we knew right from the beginning when we first started that we weren't going to duplicate the works of some of these archives, but rather we want to assist the filmmakers from these Asian countries who possibly didn't have the means to actually archive their works, or that their national film archives could not or do not archive for different reasons. So this is just, in a way, what we wanted to do is just to fill the gaps of providing a home and giving access to possibly lesser known works, but equally significant films as well. So currently, we're one of the few, if not the only, film archive with sort of this transnational focus that is actually not targeted at like a specific Asian country. So through the years, we've actually worked with other archival institutions as well to care for materials that do not necessarily fall under our purview or our collecting ambit. and to minimize duplication as well. So one of the projects that I've started working on is also to search for film elements of specific Asian as well as Singaporean films that may be residing with private collectors and film archives outside of Asia as well, and working with these respective institutions and their owners to digitize and at times to restore some of these films. So I wanted to share a clip. This is something a colleague of mine took 10 years ago. I think I was still an intern at that time, and I was just opening some film reels. So this was like stored in like a 35mm film reel stored in a Ziploc bag. And I was trying to find out whether any of this is salvageable. So I believe this was a 35mm sound negative from a film that was in the 1950s that was kept in a storeroom within a warehouse. Within a warehouse building. So there was air conditioning in the storeroom, and but they only operate during office hours, and the room was next to like a tenant that runs a carpentry business as well. So this is really quite a bad environment to restore films, and the film of course has been there for many years before it was given to us. So this was pretty much one of the worst, I guess, irreparable cases of film damage that we've encountered, you know, and I think this damage is mostly due to environmental factors like temperature and humidity, which is something that's really common, especially in our part of Southeast Asia, you know, and due to poor handling of the materials as well. So, you know, these factors, you know, affect film in so many different ways, and these are just some of the images I've taken in my years working on films itself. And many times when we collect films, we also need to be aware of the type of film material we're collecting, whether they're negatives or they're release screens or the original camera negatives. So many of the filmmakers also don't realize that that the negatives is actually the most crucial element, which they usually just retain the exhibition prints and ended up leaving the negative somewhere else in the world. I mean, in my years in the archive as well, I came across the video format, which is also really interesting because this was a format when I first started work at the archive that I encountered really a lot, because many of the filmmakers who were into this digital video filmmaking at that time, this is a format that they chose to shoot on, which allowed them a lot more control than using film, using 16 or 35. I mean, what's worrying right now is this is pretty much obsolete at this point, because a lot of these formats, especially the mini DV, are really quite difficult to repair and find playback machines these days. But how I wanted to maybe sort of end my segment is really to talk about my work environment. So with actually having worked in an actual archive for more than a decade, so I've witnessed firsthand the changes with my environment that arrive with time, and as well the advancement of digital technology. So we're still dealing with issues, you know, concerning the preservation of analog material such as film and video, you know, especially with space in Singapore, you know, where land is scarce and expensive, and you know, and we have to still constantly think about how do we maintain the resources to run, you know, this climate control repository, and the strategies in handling, say, the formats that are turning obsolete. But just a few years ago, my environment started to change, and this is really a different ball game for us. And I wanted to show just a glimpse of what our workstation looks like now, in a way, like it's hard drives and ingestion, full of ingestion and things like that. And I wanted to maybe put it across and compare, like this. So on the left is a picture of the film repository of film, 35mm film that we keep in the climate control repository, and on the other hand is the row of LTO tapes, which is this magnetic data tape technology that we now use to house born digital materials. So the preservation of born digital materials is actually quite a complex issue for that all archives are facing currently, and which many of us are adapting, using different sets of preservation strategies. So this is something that I think will probably come up later, I guess, maybe in the discussion. And it will probably, just talking about it itself could probably take us like 2-3 hours, but I guess maybe we can talk about it just a little bit later today. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Tepao. Well, that's interesting. The last part you have just mentioned about archiving digital material corresponds to actually the subject of our discussion today, future archive. I mean, like we are keep discussing about the tangible material, but what about the material that since the first place is intangible and circulated not in the physical way? Okay, but before we start, maybe Lisa, do you want to add a bit further about the technical aspect you have faced during the preservation practice or restoration practice in Jakarta, or maybe also in the Netherlands? Or do you want to share something?
Yes, even though I won't be showing you pictures, but the challenges of our work in Indonesia is not first and foremost a technical challenge. Yeah. Yes, of course, we have, environmental challenge, climate, humidity, temperature. But what I feel has been terribly difficult is actually more the political aspects, that we constantly have to deal with a political climate that never really wants sincerely to, preserve elements of history for many reasons. So what I try to build up over the years, since I came into, realizing that archiving and preservation, as well as restoration for access is very important, I constantly try to find a good way to work around all these challenges, and trying many different kinds of ways to do it. First, I was creating programs to show films, and that has a very big technical consequences. Because it really doesn't help if I am the only one who understands how to operate 35 millimeter projector or 16 millimeter projector. So the kind of technical consequences that I had to do at the time was that I have to organize twice a year training for whoever it is that was interested in learning how to use analog projectors. And the Jakarta Arts Council kind of facilitated that at that time. So, every year we have 2 batches of people who come and learn how to operate projectors and get a knowledge about how to handle celluloid material as projectionists. And then I started exploring something else, which has a lot still to do with accessing films. But if you remember in the beginning, I talked about how bad the condition of materials that I get to see as programmers. Like sometimes I would wonder myself, as a programmer, would I want to see this, show this to my audience? Like, what do they get out of it? There is this very deep trauma, so to speak, for us as a post-colonial subject, that we always think that our history is inferior, and if we see it in a visually inferior quality, that kind of adds to the sentiment, that our history doesn't really matter. And because it takes so much effort and so much money to preserve it, then we can as well forget about it. Yeah, that's like the easy way, and you know, to kind of vent a kind of frustration about this. So the first thing I tried to do was, okay, if access was possible, how do I make it happen? So I tried to train myself and my colleagues, and later also a bigger group of people in using celluloid material, because that's like the best material we could show, yeah, to an audience. And then the second thing I was trying to do was to understand because of course we were seeing, you know, a lot of this classical film release, like for example, one of the most famous label is Criterion Collection. Like they would continue to, you know, introduce us to like really great classics, super good quality. And I thought, okay, how do I do this? How do I achieve this? And then I get to learn, and practically it was like an on-the-job training. Yeah, I learned how to do restoration. And it was such a big revelation to me in the process of almost 3 years working on the restoration of After the Curfew, Lewat Jam Malam, that from zero knowledge of what film restoration was at that time in 2010 to by the time the film was finished, I was also almost graduating from my university degree in preservation and presentation of the moving image. By then, I just realized how much work technically and politically it takes to restore a film. So I have to remind you that when we say, you know, things about what we do as archivist or film restorer, only half of the work is actually technical. You know, the other half is politics. It can be about, you know, funding politics, getting access to material, convincing people to trust us to handle their material, and also think a lot about how we do it ethically and also in a just way, coming from a more, you know, post-colonial background. So, and then after, you know, after going through this, After the Curfew process, which was really a huge project, in my personal experience, it was almost colossal because it involved, you know, people from Indonesia, people from Singapore, from the National Museum of Singapore, the lab in Bologna, and then later also the World Cinema Foundation from the United States. So suddenly I was catapulted to this huge international project where, you know, you have to all the time consider people's interest and also learning about what it means to bring an old and decaying film back to life. Like, you know, what you saw from Tipau's presentation, this very sticky reel is kind of the worst that can happen. But even if a reel of film is not at that point yet, it's already very difficult to restore. And I think people think that film restoration is a kind of compensation, yeah, for the damage that a film reel has experienced throughout the year. And, you know, when we do restoration, everything is well again. It's not. I'm really sorry to break the news, but it's not. What we can do is to simulate, especially with digital technology, to simulate what would be the best condition of this film at the time that it was made, but it is still a simulation. The real material continues to decay. It's just like human body. We cannot, I mean, if we grow older, we cannot rewind and, you know, make our body young again. And a film is just the same. It's a physical material. So what I do, for example, in film restoration is, of course, I have to try and stabilize the material, but equally in parallel, I also have to make a kind of digital interpretation of what it looked when it was at its best condition. So, and this technology is very complex. It's also, the possibility is very wide. Like you can do it like in a super sophisticated, complicated, and expensive technology. But it is also possible to find ways to do it in a much simpler technology without having to compromise on, you know, the aspects of what you want to do, which is to bring out a good interpretation of what the film would look in its best condition. So this brings me to my last stage of profession, which I am currently in right now, is I continue to explore ways, how is it that I can practice film restoration that is affordable in our region, that I can do it with the technology that is also available in the region and the knowledge. And at the same time, bring it back to the audience so that it becomes like a circular process, yeah, that discovering the decaying reel, trying to technically bring it back to the audience in the most affordable restoration possible, and then reintroducing it so that the interest is growing. And so I have to settle, for example, for an experiment where I work with a very small team, a team of 5 people in Jakarta, where we really do everything by ourselves, starting from taking the reel out from the storage, repairing it, digitizing it using, you know, a low-end scanner, but nevertheless, it's like 2K scanner, and making digital restoration for each frame. And from the 5 people in this team, 3 people actually have to work from start to finish, including myself. So we spent about 2 years restoring a film of, let's say, 100 minutes, black and white, with all the tools that we could find in Jakarta at that time, including sound restoration. And it is possible. So, I mean, I cannot say that, you know, there is only one way to do this job, which is fantastic. And it is also exciting to explore, you know, with the very limited means that you have, and all the challenges, social, political, whatever, you can still do something. And that's why I keep doing things. And so if you're interested, for example, in seeing the result of this low budget, like almost indie kind of restoration, it's a film called Aladdin, and it comes from 1953. It's a fantastic film based on 1001 Nights story, Aladdin. And it's very interesting because in 1953, this film was produced really parallelly alongside, you know, all this, you know, more auteur kind of film produced by Usmar Ismail, you know, the classics that we know. And this film is produced at the same time as an like entertainment film, you know, from what we see now in, I don't know, drama, comedy genre, superhero and fantasy films. This is exactly that kind of film from 1953 in Indonesia. So it also tells us a lot about, you know, aspects that we might not read in our history books, because of course it's not heroic or anything, but it was the kind of thing that also entertained people at that time. And probably we also recognize, you know, how close people were to this kind of fantastic theatrical presentation. There are lots of songs, like really jazzy songs in that film that were originally written for the film. Like in a way, this film is a little bit like an operette, where, you know, each important character has their own songs. So, you know, looking back again at this project and comparing it with After the Curfew or Lewat Jam Malam, they could not have been more different in terms of technical work. But I think the achievement in terms of, you know, discovering history is the same. And that's why just to finish this part of talk, I really would like to encourage us to rethink about, you know, what is possible in our profession and our love of history and this quest, yeah, to rediscover history. I mean, we don't always have to try to do the impossible. Let's just try to do what is possible, because in the end, to do something is what matters.
Oh, well, thank you, Lisa, for elaborating it further. Maybe we'll get back to you again afterward, but I'm interested in your explanation about the political climate. It was not easy. And before, Tepao said about like open call. From what I got, open call is like you open submission for everyone who wants to submit their film to be archived or restored. From this brief to explanation, it seems like since its inception, the accessibility to the material itself is pale in comparison between the Singapore and Indonesia. I cannot say that Singapore really represents the Singapore as a country or the Asia as a domain of AFA. But can you tell me, Tepao, how is it with the situation to access the film and then to gain the trust? Because you also said that when it was started, it was also like a startup or like a small scale archiving. So I believe at that time, at that period, the technology to digitize it or to archive it was not as professional as it's supposed to be. I mean, like, can you elaborate more the situation you face with the accessibility and the trust?
Yes. Yeah, so at that time, I think, I mean, when we first started, like 15 years ago, I think only countries like Asian countries like Indonesia, Laos, Vietnam, and Thailand have actually their own dedicated film archives. And that was actually the state of the film archiving landscape in the region at that time when we first started. And then over the years, we see countries like Cambodia and then Philippines begin establishing their own archives as well. So I guess in a way, we were also responding to the kind of outputs at that time, you know, dealing with the analog formats. And I think at that time we were also not quite sure what we're going to get as well when we open up this call. And I think it also went through like a word of mouth among you know, the film communities of different parts of Asia as well. And so a lot of them started sending us things like DVD screeners, I think at the start, because we do have a collection guideline in place at that time. So we did publish that guidelines to say what kind of films we're looking for specifically, you know, and we got this whole lot of screeners, and then we had to actually view them, and then we sort of make an assessment based on the guidelines if we feel it's culturally important or historically important that we should keep this film. And then it started this conversation with the filmmakers themselves and have them understand that I think to them, I think it's a very new idea as well, this Asian film archive, you know, and a lot of times people also ask us, you know, because we're based in Singapore as well, we are sort of in that, I guess we can say we're sort of in that unique position as well, that we are small, but we do have the support of some of the agencies that we were working with at that time that sort of make it easy for us. For example, 2 years after our inception, we actually started a partnership with the National Library Board of Singapore. There was only 2 people in the organization at that time, and because of that, we didn't even have a repository. So we had to start working with different agencies, and that's how we sort of take in our collection and then allow for access and be able to allow for access. And that's how we first started. So that, and the partnership was created, you know, with the National Archives of Singapore at that time as well, so that we could actually share a space in their repository. And to this agency, they also see a lot of this synergy of archiving these works. And I think at that time, because we were also a non-governmental organization as well, and a lot of film archives at that time were also state, you know, were also government film archives that were in the other countries at that time. And so that itself, I say it was also sort of a way in which some of the independently made films or the filmmakers who made these films felt more inclined to actually deposit it with an organization like us at that time. So they saw the value in our work. And I guess this whole idea of not just of this transnational focus, I think that kind of helped when we talk to these people.
Okay, but do you also encourage people build the awareness of the importance of submitting their film for the future archive? I mean, because most of the idea of archiving at this stage in a certain region like Indonesia, where archiving is not like a well-rooted practice in a public institution, mostly is to have access again to the old work, or we try to archive the forgotten work, but not like in the awareness of archiving the present work. I mean, I mean, in Singapore, how big is that a portion for the archiving policy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what you're referring to is more like the advocacy component of the work. Definitely. I mean, we've sort of done an appeal almost every year, just to raise awareness on the importance of keeping films, and not just all films. You're right, and in fact, we encourage filmmakers to start thinking about preserving their works as soon as they're being made. You know, and this is what we always advocate for. And I mean, we are really, really fortunate to have built up, you know, this collection of films and gathered support from some of these filmmakers that are able to actually advocate for us as well. So we do this campaign almost every year, which we call it #SaveOurFilm. which we invite submissions. You know, whether you are an established filmmaker or you're an aspiring filmmaker or you're a student filmmaker, we invite all submissions that part of the year, and then we assess from then. In fact, there's no deadline. You know, people just submit as and when they want. But we do this sort of appeal every year. So we engage the our supporters, mainly the filmmakers, to sort of speak, to offer their opinions about their thoughts about archiving and speak about their own experiences. So a lot of them got really personal, you know, because they've lost a lot of their own works as well. So they're able to speak to the camera and tell these people, you know, as the film community, as fellow filmmakers, it's you should start thinking about preserving and archiving your work at the start of your career and not just at the end, you know, or before you move on to your next film, you know, and so on. And really, I think this really resonate with and relate, and it's really relatable to many of the people, especially I think with digital formats these days. It's a really concerning situation with digital. In fact, we believe that we're losing more digital films today than we've lost older films on analog.
Yeah.
We have, which is what we've been advocating about.
Okay, well, now shifting a little bit about this, because since if the younger generation or more recent filmmakers submit their film, there's a gesture of ownership in that practice. Now I want to get back to Lisa. With all the film archived in Indonesia or restored in Indonesia, how's the ownership situation? This is like, I always wonder, like I watched many of this film when I was a kid in television. And then I heard some of the company, they closed already. And then the remaining copy belongs to the television. I wonder how it's the situation at this moment with this film already made, already circulated for decades. How is it?
Well, this condition is not specific to Indonesian circumstances. It really is happening all over the world.
Okay.
Where ownership of film, first of all, is again very complex because okay, let's take as an example film that was produced in film, in celluloid. So in order for it to be screened, you have to make many copies of this film. So most of the time, the film copy in 35 millimeter would end up in, let's say, 100 different places. But people who actually hold this print are not the owners. The owners is still the company that made it. And so, and it is happening quite often that the company itself actually forgot to kind of bring back their copies, so to speak. And this is maybe a condition that is more specific to our context in Southeast Asia, that we don't really have lots of film lab operating sustainably in the region. So a lot of films that got made in Southeast Asia, after it was shot, it had to be sent to another country like Japan, Hong Kong, China, Australia, or sometimes also Europe to be developed. So you have to imagine there would be hundreds of film reels constantly moving in and out of the country. And then at some point it just stopped, somewhere. And this is how film gets lost. So in the end, sometimes what comes back to Indonesia is only an internegative or sometimes also screening copies, positive copies. The negative stays at the lab. So what is now circulating in Indonesia, and maybe also what is kept by the owners, are actually an inferior quality of the film, because like Tipao said, like the highest hierarchy in film quality is the negative, the original camera negative. The negative just lies in the lab somewhere. So we have a very complicated situation of, the owner that doesn't have any physical material to own. And there are hundreds of people in different countries that actually holds the physical thing without ownership. Yeah, so when, for example, we want to restore a film, or even just store a film in the archive, one of our jobs is to make contracts. Yeah, so that the owner, the rightful owner of this film, say to us, yes, you can keep my film, or yes, you can restore my film. And then maybe there is an extra clause in that agreement saying, yes, you can show my film, because that's also a different thing. So what you're talking about is this extra clause, right? Like, yes. Under what circumstances we can show your film. This is, again, a topic where we have to make some notes, because it is hard to imagine this in Indonesia today, because the system doesn't work quite in the same way anymore. I don't know if it still works this way in Singapore, but in Indonesia today, we no longer have film distributors. So what happens is that producers would have to, so the right owners would have to sell their films directly to the audience, basically. Yeah, they put their film in the cinema and sell tickets to the audience without distributor. So when we say, okay, can we screen your film? We should talk to the producer. That's why when the film company already went bankrupt or it's dissolved, we have nobody else to talk to. So there are films out there, just laying out there, or sometimes at TV stations, sometimes on YouTube, that has no owner. In archival work, we have a very special term for this kind of film. It's called orphans, because they don't have parents anymore. They don't have anybody who takes care of them. And the situation with orphan film is, of course, unclear, but in some countries, archivists have advocated to regulate this, yeah, to make sure that the public can kind of access or use orphan films, but in a way that is not costing the potential owner, if they still exist, financial loss. Meaning that you cannot just, take an orphan film, put it up on YouTube and put ad on your channel. That is unethical, and it shouldn't be allowed. So right management is, personally, I think is the most complicated part of archival work. And it always has to be contextual, because every country has different laws. And also, not only the law, but the degree that people understand what their right is sometimes very vague, So coming back to your issue about, okay, what is actually happening, like as situation to this film? I can only say that we really need to start talking openly about this, because sometimes discussion about film rights, happens behind closed doors or in courtrooms. but it's not happening in the public realm where we actually are using them or abusing them. Maybe I would just like to say that as audience or a programmer like me, an archivist, I would stand in a position where I want to advocate for the public to have a fair amount of right to use film material. Like, it is good to keep public a certain kind of access, not the commercial access, but it is important to give access to archive to the public in order so that they remember you as filmmaker, you know, because then it can be part of the public's history. I'm not an expert in, you know, copyright law or intellectual property law, but I do believe that, you know, when you spend money, time, and your creativity to create something and something beautiful, you have the right to also get something out of it. And please don't get me wrong when I say I want to advocate for public, the right for the public to access certain film in a fair way. I don't mean that we should just make everything open and free. That is not what I mean. But what I mean is that the right for the public to access film fairly should be protected. At the same time, the right for the filmmaker, film owner to exploit or to make money out of their film should be also protected by the law. So when we try to make the situation better, we have to think about these both aspects, not one canceling the other.
Oh, thank you. Well explained. But I wonder, as much as we want to protect the ownership of the film and not to violate the rights for the respective owner when it still exists for any like any financial advantage of the film, but still a good film is the film that meets the audience. And the problem with the film archive in Indonesia, I heard a lot about the restoration program takes place especially with a film made by public fund, especially during the 50s and 60s. But to access it is not easy. I mean, like I could not say apple to apple. Like I want to watch film by in Germany. You want to watch Fassbinder, you can go to Arsenal to watch film by Fassbinder or Fatih Akin. But or you can find like a Piramli collection DVD. I mean, it's way easier to find a collection by Benjamin Shueb. I mean, like even like a Dono collection. I mean, like I don't know how to access it. Like the easiest way. I mean, I'm not talking about what's available on YouTube. It's ubiquitous on internet. But the legal way. I mean, like how's the situation? I mean, like it seems like it's in Indonesia. It's like a two different thing to archive and to show it to public or for public to have an access. I don't know. Maybe after this, Tepao can share the situation with the archive film and accessibility for the public to watch it. Who wants to start first?
Tepao.
Yeah, so I think before digital came along, we've always had a reference collection for the public. I mean, at least based in Singapore, you'll be able to access the collection through our reference collection. So whatever we preserve, we make our efforts to make it available for access. But I think when digital started happened, when digital films started happening, then we started shifting our access strategy, you know, and especially at this time with the pandemic where everything needs to be accessed remotely, and this is something that we're really excited to be working towards as well. I think many archives has also started to make the or at least portion of their collections available for research purposes. You know, whether it be for free, you know, or maybe for based on a subscription sort of model, and that's something that I think would probably be really relevant, because, you know, I think at this time it's really difficult to sort of walk into a library or walk into an archive and sit the whole day, because yeah, I think this pandemic really sort of is really quite changed our perspectives quite a lot. But of course we did think about that even before the pandemic itself, but I think this just sort of accelerated, I think, to rethink this accessibility. And that, I think that's something, I think different archives will have different sets of challenges. I mean, we're still trying to work around it. And I think that's something we will have to deal with for the next couple of years, I believe. And but yeah, I mean, it's accessible, but the question is, you know, we're now going to be catering for a different kind of audience from here on, you know, and how do we then tackle that? Because you will have people who wants to be able to maybe say just access clips from their mobile phones and things like that. So these are things that we have to start thinking about, I think. Like, it may not be the full films. We may not put full films, for instance, maybe based on the fact that maybe some owners may still want that physical reference to take place, but we will, you know, for example, put up clips or even the related materials. I mean, this is something that we're looking forward to make them available, I think, at least for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I realized as the lockdown started and lots of archives, libraries, museums open up part of their collection online, I really think that it is actually quite wonderful how, you know, knowledge and information is more available throughout this pandemic. And it also offers a different way of researching, because the way of, you know, accessing, researching, or even programming, for me, has always have to do with medium. Like, you know, what is a film made of? You know, how you show it. Like, also what kind of physical relationship you have with it. And the pandemic kind of cuts everything off. And I have to say that in the beginning, I really struggled to rethink about my programming policy and my researching policy as well. And it's just a coincidence that I happen to be working at the moment with a very small, almost accidental collection that is coming from like an antique shop, physical material. But again, like what RIZKI mentioned, it's most of them are like orphans. Yeah, there's no owner. These are films made for, I don't know, company profiles, to advertise tourism, to Bali, for example, you know, things that are made in the 70s. They're not even films as we know it. Yeah, they're not somebody's work. Like, yes, there are sometimes names of directors, but it is not produced as such as, you know, a director's work or something. So I do think that this change in the archive really opens up a big possibility. Like maybe I wouldn't go as far as, you know, doing my research by watching clips on my phone just because I'm not used to it. But I can imagine like some people would benefit a lot from doing that. Like, you know, if you're a student and all you can afford is a cell phone, then this possibility will mean a lot to you. Yeah, what is previously not possible for you is now possible. So I'm really thankful to hear that, you know, like for example, you, Tipao, and colleagues at AVA is thinking in this direction and, you know, making it accessible to people with, let's say, budget and gadgets. It is important because that is the kind of research scene or user scene that we are facing in Southeast Asia. It's really thoughtful of you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, since we are talking about the file circulating in the digital platforms, then it means generating financial benefit that can get back to the archiving practice and sustain this practice. But how big is this sustainability that you can retrieve from this archive circulation? I don't know. I mean, like, there are tons of people who are willing to buy box set of the newly scanned film by Fritz Lang. Like, oh, this is the extended version that found in the South America, DVD or the Blu-ray. You can always get the money and the money get back to the film museum again. I mean, like these small things, I heard that you can actually generate money from like AdSense, but how big is actually for the digital activation of the archive itself? Like we're talking about the future. Maybe this is the future of archiving.
Who should answer this?
Maybe
Tipao, because we're talking about the platform and it's ready.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we've witnessed this firsthand as well. I think especially in the case of, say, our restored works, because I think because of the rise of this streaming services like Netflix, you know, and iTunes and so on, and there's this renewed interest on heritage films, you know, films that were made. It's funny because I think one of the festival actually termed it, I recall, a heritage film is any film that's made before 2005, which is hilarious, right? But yeah, so
I now get offended.
Yeah, it's a heritage film, but it's true in a way. It's like after 2005, everything is digital in a way, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think all these archives and back catalogs becomes valuable than before because of the rise of this technology, and sort of create this second life. I think for films and but I think at least from our point of view, we've not actually gone into monetizing it, at least for at least not for the long term. So in fact, this is really something that we like when we restore a film, we usually would try and negotiate, say, for example, like what Lisa said, you know, some certain rights for us to be able to screen the films for our own, and maybe we could come into some kind of arrangement. But I think ultimately we've not really really come up with sort of a strategy to sort of think of a long-term monetization of the collection, which we're not quite thinking at the moment. But I do agree that with this, you know, with the rise of digital sort of streaming services, I think it does bring back to a lot of attention comes back to the archive, because suddenly I have many filmmakers who say, would you digitize my film, or I want to take it out and I want to digitize it because I want to monetize it. And I think for us, that's a very good thing as well, in a way, especially when the filmmaker takes that initiative, because when a film is digitized, it means the archive also gets to preserve the digital copy as well. And, we will be able to maybe show it today, because it's really, really difficult to be able to show a 35, at least in Singapore, because they're currently all the cineplexes have gone fully digital, since I think 2012, in fact. So it's a good thing, I would say, for archives, not necessarily on monetization, but more in terms of preservation as well as access. That we see that there's this reason, I think, for us to keep working and keep deciding or making assessments on, say, on certain digitization projects as well as restoration projects, to sort of meet some of this, I would say, renewed interest, I would say, in these heritage films. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Lisa, do you want to add the situation in Indonesia with this, how to sustain the archiving practice with the financial support from the archiving itself?
Let's see it specifically also about this digital economy, so to speak, like how films circulate as digital content, so to speak. Again, I would offer a perspective from like programmer/user side, because I think Thibaut has told us a lot about how the archive would see it. Like from a programmer or user point of view, of course, it's fantastic to be able to access things online, but I think we also have to be very aware that it's a different playing field altogether, because as even myself as an audience, I behave very differently with a film screening that happens at the cinema. Like I do more efforts for cinema screenings. I take the time to go there. I kind of make a certain schedule free to do it. I go there, I buy a ticket, I spend the time, real time, watching the film. And then, maybe there's a Q&A afterwards, and then I go home. So it's a very big dedication, I think, to engage in a physical screening. Whereas I feel that I behave very differently when it's a digital content. It's more like, okay, I watch it when I can. And every time I watch something, even if it's like different film, it's always the same because I'm facing my computer, or okay, I have a small home projector, but it's always the same. And I don't meet other people. There is no real energy interaction inside of the cinema that sometimes is, the fourth element of a film. Film can have 3 dimensions, but the fourth element is in the cinema seat, where you feel the energy of other audience. We laugh together, cry together, blah, blah, blah. And let's face it, the money that you pay or the money that you get from digital screening is very different. Like people expect digital screenings to be cheap, dirt cheap even, because that is how we are conditioned to value digital screening, because it's like, okay, it's like a big catalog. You're always seeing it from your own gadget, and therefore it should be cheap. And you should be able to access like thousands of film at the same time. Everything is like on your fingertips. In a way, film is treated as some sort of an inferior thing, yeah, in comparison to at the cinema, where it's really put on a stage and kind of appreciated, just, you know, from the sheer physical way of how we present it. So I think it will still take some time for this economy to be able to give us the same income as cinema screenings or cinema distribution, also for non-commercial programming. Yeah, like people are less willing to pay something for non-commercial programming. I mean, let's be honest here. People have gotten used to YouTube, all this free video platform, and slowly people also don't mind seeing ads on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do, but a lot of people don't. Yeah. So, whereas, you know, when you see ads in the middle of films, like, you also should ask yourself, like, who actually gets the money for this? Like, you know, are we unconsciously just making, you know, some other companies that have nothing to do with the filmmaker or the archive that keeps it, or people who restore it, get money out of it? Like, what kind of economy is that? So, of course, we are still in the process of, you know, refining and making it better, blah, blah, blah. But I would say that, you know, monetizing through online screening is extremely difficult still, and very, very unjust. Like, you know, unjust.
Yeah. Maybe I just want to add on. So I have to say, you know, the amount of resources, perhaps like an institution, for example, like LISABONA, and even for us at the AFA, the amount of resources that we put in to restore, even to simply just to digitize, we would never be able to sort of recoup that amount anyway. You know, it's something that we always constantly have to put out, and because you know, there's this ownership of the film, you know, and for us it's really just for us the goal is to really to be able to show the work and to preserve it. And then on the other hand, there's also a lot of filmmakers also feel that as long as the work is sort of hosted on some streaming platform, they sort of equate this access to preservation, which is really not true. And we often have to remind, you know, them that, you know, just because it's available and it's accessible through all these different platforms doesn't mean it's preserved. And they shouldn't mix this up, especially when they're negotiating sort of their different copyrights.
Yeah. Just adding a little bit, but I just get a question from a reader in the Instagram account of Rumata. This is actually important because archiving practice and a holistic practice, not from the side of the archive institution, but also the filmmakers. Fatima from Indonesia asking, she is a filmmaker, what should amateur filmmakers or take part in the archiving practice? What should one does at the first place with the material, with the medium, with the, I don't know, let's say it's a digital. Now everything is made in digital. What is the best a filmmakers can do? I mean, like, of course, find your closest archive center. Yeah, but what kind of medium, what kind of file, what kind of like storing behavior a filmmaker should start first with this gesture?
Yeah, I think I can maybe start. So I think for us it's always we sort of it's very different, but we sort of follow some similar principles when we, for example, deal with analog materials, which, you know, storing it at different sites. I think that should apply as well. I mean, of course, besides, you know, considering to donate it to the film archive, you know, like us. But on their own, they should really how should I put it? Sort of, okay, the problem we have with a lot of born digital material is that many filmmakers do not organize their files on their drive. So not only they keep it on one drive, but they keep so many versions in the same folder, for example. I think I cannot stress enough the importance of naming conventions for files. I have seen like something film title final and then final, you know, it's crazy. And when we ask the filmmaker what's the difference, because I came across this filmmaker who gave us two versions of the same file, of the same title, but there was a difference of I think at least 3 minutes, which is kind of substantial, right? I mean, if you think about it,
in terms of frames, yes,
for a feature film, you know, he cannot recall what's the difference. He couldn't tell us, and what do you expect us to know? You know, it's like, and that's the sometimes that's the frustrating part for us when we get handed over a hard drive full of things, full of rushes even. So some filmmakers even give us ambient sound that they recorded, like and like several takes of it, several takes of the same ambient sound. So I always like to share these examples with a lot of students, especially, which is, I think at the start, really need to learn. It's quite sad to say this, but just creating the right folders for different things and naming conventions, I think it's the most important of all. Knowing what you own and discarding what you no longer need is important as well.
Oh, wait. Sorry. Allow me to interrupt. By discarding is discarding the finished material that is no longer relevant.
So when it's no longer relevant, for example, do you really need to keep, you know, every single sound take, every single ambient sound take?
Okay.
So I encountered a film where they gave me 50 takes of a cow eating grass. Like, do you really need that? so it's hilarious. Yeah, I really learning good organization is key. Not to rely on solely one hard drive. Learn to make use of the tools that technology has given us. You know, things like you know, your personal tools like Google Drive or OneDrive. These are really good for personal use. If you're not using a large capacity, these are things that you could just pay a simple subscription that you can do. They're free tools as well that you could use to validate your files, for example. This is a whole, you could do a whole workshop just on this. And really knowing what you have is key. And not relying on solely one hard drive. Keep it in several sites with different people. But of course, and most importantly, you know, they should consider giving it to an archive as well. And yep, I think that's about it.
Well, okay. Well, we have reached the 90 minutes. Allocate for our discussion, but maybe before, Lisa, do you want to add something that maybe close our discussion today? Well, we can always extend this with a different aspect of archiving, but yeah, since let's make it focus on the future. We started from the analog, from the tangible, then let's embrace the digital. That's inevitable medium. It's inevitable behavior to access the medium. So it's the future. What we have to pay attention for this, I mean, like things that we didn't see with the analog material, what we should pay attention for the future material.
I just want to stress really importance. I mean, Tipa already talked about how you organize files. I want to add the importance of maintaining it, like, you know, try and access it from time to time, because digital format is new and it's very lively, it's very dynamic. If you count how many updates you get offered within 1 year, 12 months of your software, for example, it's really crazy, right? And each time there is an update, there is a change in the software. Before you know it, like, you know, after 3-5 years, your file can be obsolete. And, you know, just put in your mind these pictures of videotapes and film reels that Tipa is showing today. You know, they can be made 100 years ago and we can still see it today. The videotapes, less so. Why? Because we actually don't see what is recorded. You know, it's just information. You see the carrier, you see the cassette, but you don't see the information. You don't see the pictures, you don't hear the sound. And with digital, it's even worse. Yeah, because it's just 0 and 1 encoded into some sort of not even physical container anymore. So when you have finished with keeping your file systematically, selecting, you know, keeping it down to the necessary and what's used, try to promise yourself and really do it to revisit it, like maybe once in a couple of years, like every 2 years. Just have the discipline to play back your files and make sure that you can access them, because really, before you know it, you won't be able to access them anymore if it's a digital file. So please do that for your future or our future.
Well, Tepao, do you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe adding to that, I think I recall like a couple of years ago, Apple announced like they were discontinuing certain codecs, and that's why it sent like quite a massive fury from some of the filmmakers. I think they started going back to their older projects and they had to re-export certain things, you know, using the newer codecs. And that's something that it's just going to happen from time to time. And it's just a matter of time where codec that the filmmakers are currently using is going to be obsolete, like what Lisa said. And then, you know, how are we going to play back the files? Because when you think about it, it's proprietary, you know, QuickTime, and so on. So I mean, yeah. So really trying to take stock of what digital content you have on your drive is really key. And just to give you to also sort of debunk the perception that archiving digital files is easier and cheaper is wrong. For archives, it's completely wrong, because just to give you an example, you know, the cost of, and we have the figures, the cost of preserving, for example, a feature film or an analog film master, which is, say, on a film, per year is actually estimated at USD $1,329. Whereas a digital preservation of the same film would cost us $15,709, which is at least 10 times more for one title. So that's the challenges I think archives have. And we're just hoping for the best. Yeah.
Well, okay. Thank you, Tepao. Thank you, Lisa. We have finally discussed about the future of archive. Like we move a bit further from the tangible material that, of course, we have to pay attention to. We have to always take care of, especially in our region, the tropical humid region. But please don't sleep on the digital. And thank you for Rumata, and thank you for SEAscreen Manifesto for initiating this discussion. This is like a valuable session to review how far we've go with our archiving practice. Well, we're looking forward for the similar discussion in the future. Again, maybe we have reached a new level on archiving practice.
Or we will just be checking on everyone after a couple of years.
Yes.
You keep your file.
Okay. Well, again, thank you and goodbye. See ya.
Thank you. Bye, Tipa.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.